The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 123.
Oh man, Euchre's been broadcasting for 27 years. I have never seen anything like this. They need 2 inches. Dennis Franklin, the quarterback, taking a long con from center. He hands off to Shuttlesworth 5, and it's down to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Dennis Franklin! Oh my God, Dennis Franklin fooled everybody. He fooled me. He fooled the entire Ohio State team. Kneeling is Larry Gustafson. Attempting will be Super Toe. Super Toe will kick the 30-yard field goal. It's good to send over there. It's a tied-up ball game. 10-10. Okay. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Carter hands up. Carter is down. Oh my God! Carter scores! Look at those Wolverines. 95 Wolverines going to the end zone. Carter got the pass. In the air, it's done. Buford is going out of his mind. I have never seen anything like this in all my 40 years of covering Michigan football.
This is the Michigan Man Podcast. On GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. For Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome back to the Michigan Man Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It was a dogfight, but the Wolverines came away with a hard-earned 31-25 victory Saturday against a very disciplined and well-drilled Air Force squad. It was a perfect day for the home opener, and while many questions remain, some of the answers were on display Saturday. Those answers being in the form of 6 freshmen contributing on defense and a receiving corps led by the Devons, Gardner, and Funchess, as well as Jeremy Jackson. We started out slowly last year, and the preseason expectations for this team were probably, make that definitely, too high. I believe in Coach Hoke and his staff and the mold he is trying to cast. I truly believe that this team will be much better come October, and by November we should be peaking. So it goes when you are rebuilding a program, and make no mistake, that is what Coach Hoke and his staff are undertaking. Better days are ahead. Patience should be the watchword for all Michigan fans the next 2 years. On today's Michigan Rewind, we will be joined by beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press and get his thoughts on the Air Force win. Then it's time to look ahead to this week's opponent, the UMass Minutemen. Harry Plumer from the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com will bring us up to speed on this week's visitors. Mark Snyder will join us again on Michigan Game Day with his UMass scouting report. That said, let's get things kicked off with our view from Section 17. My thoughts on Saturday's game. Offense. We're struggling on the offensive line. This might not be the most talented group we've seen in wing-tipped helmets, but I don't think they're as bad as they've looked the first 2 weeks. Continuity on the O-line is key, and it will take some time for this group to get in sync. When they do, I expect we'll see an uptick in the running game from Fitz, Vince, and Thomas Rawls. Hopefully, Stephen Hopkins will make an impact at fullback, too. Denard will be fine. He looked much more comfortable throwing the ball on Saturday, and Devin Gardner looks like he's making strides at wideout. Devin Funchess looks like he gives us something at tight end that we've been missing for quite a few years. A big man that can get off the line, he has speed, a nice set of hands, and is another big target. Jeremy Jackson looks like he could develop into a nice possession receiver. But we still need more from Roy Roundtree and Jeremy Gallen, the veterans, if that piece of the offense is going to be taken seriously by opponents. Overall, I think we'll see this unit get better and better as the season progresses. On defense, although we struggled mightily against the triple option on Saturday, and a lot of teams do, we did get to see the future of the Michigan defense. 6 freshmen were on the field at times, and 2 of them, I thought, Joe Bolden and Andre Pipkins, were significant contributors. There will be a lot of young faces seeing action the rest of the way, but this should pay benefits by midseason and most assuredly bodes well for the future. The special team play also seems to be fairly good. Dennis Norfleet seems to be the kind of kid who's a threat to go the distance each time he touches the ball. And the punting and the kicking game has been pretty solid so far. All in all, this team, as we know, is a work in progress. We're going to have moments that we, want to pull our hair out, and then moments when we realize that the future looks bright. So let's enjoy the ride. Coming up next on Michigan Rewind, we'll be joined by beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press with a look back on the home opening win against Air Force. Here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW, Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Joining us on our Michigan Rewind segment today to take a look back at that Air Force win on Saturday, Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be with you.
Well, Mark, most of us expected a bounce-back win for Michigan on Saturday against the Air Force Academy. Should we be surprised, though, that it was such a struggle?
Well, I think that's just the nature of facing Air Force, and I think other teams are going to follow that as well this year. I mean, they've got a quarterback who runs their system very effectively, and it's tough for a defense to prepare for on a one-week basis.
Well, do you think, though, that it was more a hangover from the Alabama game, or was it really just that fact that defense is so very hard in such a short period of time to prepare for?
Yeah, I don't think it was an Alabama hangover. If anything, that game motivated them to be more efficient. But I think it's just a lot to handle. I mean, they've got a lot of new pieces on that defense, and for a veteran defense, maybe they can make those adjustments really quickly. But I think there's a lot of new pieces, new players young players who are trying to get involved there. So I think that was maybe the worst matchup they could have had. So I think surviving it is actually something that's a pretty important victory for them.
Well, Mark, there were only two new starters on the offensive line this year. We knew going into the season, but it seemed like for a second week in a row, Michigan failed to get consistent blocking up front. Do you think that is more a matter of continuity with this group, even though there are only two new players? Or is it really just a talent problem at this point?
No, I think it's definitely continuity, and I think it's more than just two new players. I think it's really Michael Schofield is on the line. He played most of last year, but he played it at guard, and now he's at tackle. Ricky Barnum now is at guard, and you got Elliott Mueller at center. There's a cohesion that needs to happen, and I think it's taking some time for them to find that. And though they've tried to cross-train guys at different positions and move guys around and stuff, I think they need to stay with that group for a couple of weeks, and then hopefully they're hoping that the running game will be able to get going and they'll be able to get some push going forward. That's kind of maybe the biggest offensive issue right now is what you're getting out of the running backs, because if you don't get more out of them, you're never going to get anywhere this year.
I didn't see Coach Hoke address it or say much after the game in his presser, but do you think they're fairly happy so far with Mueller at center and then Ricky Barnum at that left guard spot?
I think they're definitely happy with Mueller. I think that, the snapping was the reason he is there instead of Barnum, who we expected to be there for a long time. And I think Mueller's done okay, but it's the question of that cohesion, like we were just talking about. I think that's going to take some time. I think Hoke definitely was bothered by it, but it's kind of a hard balance because they have to look, and after the game, he still hadn't seen the film, and they got to look and see, did Denard Robinson create all of what he did by himself, or did he have holes that the running backs just didn't see, and he had a better vision for them, and they were actually there.
Well, it was, as you said, another spectacular performance from Denard on Saturday, but we're pretty much at the same point we were last year saying, hey, we've got to start finding ways to get him help. Anything you saw on Saturday that leads you to believe that this offense is going to be more than the Denard Robinson show as we move forward?
Well, I think it's going to have to, and I think that his passing ability and the fact that he was able to use the tight end as a receiving weapon, as much as they've had at Michigan in, a decade, I guess, probably. and be able to find a reliable receiver in Devin Gardner is good. But I think they need some receiver depth, and they need to get that running game going, or else this is going to be an offense that's really stagnant, because Denard can't do this very often. I mean, it's going to happen once or twice, but he's not going to be healthy enough to be able to run all the time and throw like that.
Looks like Devin Gardner's getting more comfortable at that wide-out spot, and it was nice to see Devin Funchess look pretty darn good Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's the way you see the program going with these athletic, dynamic tight ends. And I think that Michigan understands that that's where they can have an advantage, because Funchess, with his size at 6'5", matched up against smaller safeties and linebackers, I think really can change a lot of the game. And he can get open, he can jump over them like you saw in the touchdown catch. So those are opportunities that Al Borges is going to take advantage of, especially if he's not getting it production from other places.
Well, on the defensive side of the ball, Mark, a lot of freshmen saw action on Saturday. What's your take on overall on Saturday's performance, and after 2 games, your overall impression of this defense?
Well, I think that they're forced to get young just because those are the best players. I think that there were a lot of upperclassmen who they were trying to figure out and see if they fit. But 2 games in, they're realizing they need playmakers on defense, and that's what these young guys are giving them, especially at linebacker and on the defensive line. That's where these guys can make an impact, and they're doing that. They're not getting the production out of upperclassmen that they hoped. So, you can't, in the college football season where every game's so important, you have to just embrace it and, just say, well, there may be some growing pains going through with these young guys, but then you're going to definitely reap the benefits on the back end.
Yeah, I thought the 2 guys that really jumped out were Bolden, who really seemed to be around the ball and looks like a really, really fundamentally sound tackler, and Andre Pipkins was really causing problems in the interior.
Yeah, I think so. And Pipkins, to do that on the defensive line is really impressive, because it's a tough position to play with strength and getting in condition. And Pipkins has lost a lot of weight, but adjusting to the new body, that's really something that is impressive. In terms of the linebackers, Bolden played quite a bit in the middle, and Hoke said after the game that he thought a lot of that was because, the option offense, and he knew how to defend the option. But I think Bolden has a knack for it. We heard a lot about that in the spring, that Bolden is just a natural middle linebacker. And James Ross also, as a freshman, has been able to work his way in there. In 2 games, has seen a decent amount of time. Well,
Mark, after last season's 11-2 record, do you think Michigan fans and maybe even a lot of the media were expecting too much too soon from this year's team?
No, I think that people just didn't look at the transition. I think that these coaches really have a way of developing people and getting the most out of players. But last year they were getting the most out of upperclassmen, especially on the defensive line. Whereas that's something that's been an adjustment here for guys who haven't played very much, regardless of the system. And that's something that they're trying to figure out as on the fly here. And so last year Michigan went through with very few injuries, and they had a lot of turnovers, and those are things that are not working for them so far this year. And the injuries are something maybe they can't control, but they definitely have to, start creating some more turnovers, and that's what's going to make this defense, more effective.
Well, there are a few things that have become abundantly clear, I think, after 2 games. One is, like it or not, it's going to take time for this offense to develop, especially with the continuity, as we mentioned, on that interior. And 2, the defense, we're going to see a lot of freshmen getting playing time from here on out. So do you see that paying dividends this season in October and November, or is that really something that's going to pay off beginning next year on the defensive side of the ball especially?
Well, I think it'll have to pay off this year. I think that these guys are adapting well. I mean, there's going to be more hiccups when you have younger players like that, but their potential is high-end, obviously, because otherwise the coaches wouldn't be playing them this early. They don't want to, throw away games early on, but I think they need to get these guys experience, and they figure you might as well get it when you can. So I think that, by the end of the season, those guys will be ready. The question is whether physically they'll be able to handle a whole season, and that's maybe the hardest part of being a freshman. The adaptation and the adjustment mentally and even physically isn't that difficult early in the year if you're a high-level athlete. The question is later in the season when they start to wear down and the nicks and bruises are getting to them, and they need to be motivated for a longer season than they've ever had.
Well, Mark, your overall impression after 2 games, I know this is really tough because I have a tough time getting a feel for this team this year, but after 2 games, what do you think? About what you expected to see?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot to work out, and I think that's something that Hope realized, and he said that. He continued to say that, there's going to be a developing, this is a process. But I think, they got to hang in. This week should be easier. Massachusetts, which is a terrible team, one of the worst teams in the country, so you get a little reprieve. And you Notre Dame. Notre Dame, people are going to say that, you're right there, and you're in a good shape going to the Big Ten season. They may not be Michigan State, going to probably roll some people, but at the same time, the Big Ten has its holes, and Michigan can be in the mix of that.
Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press with his take on the big win over Air Force last Saturday. Mark will be back later in the show on Michigan Game Day with his scouting report on this week's opponent, the UMass Minutemen. Coming up next, though, on our visitors segment, we'll hear from Harry Plumer, who covers the Minutemen for the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com. That's next here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Joining us on our visitors segment today is Harry Plumer, who covers the UMass Minutemen for the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com. Harry, thanks for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Well, you're very welcome. Well, Harry, this is a season of firsts for UMass football. They're making the jump from FCS to the FBS level of play, as we all know, and also will begin regular season play in the MAC very soon. So, while there's, I'm sure, a fair share of disappointment that will lie ahead in this first year of transition, UMass followers have to be excited about the future of Minuteman football, though, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think people are. For the most part, most people that you talk to are relatively realistic in their expectations and understand that this is going to take time. I think over the years, fans in general have gotten smarter over all sports, and I think college football is no different in that way. And you look at the schedule and you look at a game like this, and I don't think anybody here in Amherst expects the Minutemen to be able to get a victory. They know that this is going to take time. Historically, it's taken time. No team has ever just moved up and started lighting the world on fire. So, I think everyone's realistic, and also everyone is pretty excited for the new era. There's a lot of debate about whether, where the game should be played. I'm not sure if you're aware that UMass is playing their home games at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, which is a little over 90 miles away from campus. There's a lot of discussion about that. But beyond that, I think, most people are in favor of this move and are excited to see UMass up against some teams that they've heard of and that they've seen on TV.
Well, Harry, the season opened with a loss to UConn 37-0, and then last Saturday, Indiana from the Big Ten paid a visit, and it was another loss. Those contests were both really tough sledding for UMass. Give us a rundown on those games.
Well, they're sort of two different games. I think what we saw in week one was an offense for UMass that really couldn't get anything going. They had only 3 first downs, 59 total yards, 10 3-and-outs on 13 possessions. And when I watched that game, I sort of chalked that up to a strong UConn defense. I think UConn's got one of the better defensive units in the Big East, and UMass, with this transition, I think anyone in the game will tell you that the biggest difference is the size and speed, the strength of the offensive and defensive lines, and so UMass was really just physically overmatched especially on their offensive line by UConn's defensive line. Couldn't get any sort of running game going, and once you're going to get in 3rd and 10 every time, you're not going to be able to do much, especially with a freshman quarterback in Mike Wexton. So, but coming out of that game, they gave up 37 points, but one was an interception for a touchdown, one was a block punt for a touchdown. So your defense is on the field for essentially the whole game and only gives up 23 points. Well, I think everyone was pretty excited about that. I know after that game said, well, we got positive to look at here that maybe this defense will be able to stop some people and the offense can come along, and once maybe they get into MAC play and the defensive lines are a little bit smaller, they'll be able to block better. What we saw last week was that one, UConn only scored 7 points against NC State, so perhaps the fact that UConn couldn't really get it going had more to do with their offense not being very good than UMass's defense being better than we thought it was, because what we saw against an athletic Indiana team, and especially before Trey Roberson broke his leg, was that they were pretty much running the zone read at will, and obviously that has to be a huge concern coming in with Denard Robinson, because Trey Roberson had 100 yards, a little over 100 yards on 4 carries, and before he sadly broke his leg. But when you look at what Michigan's going to be able to do, it's not going to be any easier. The offensive line's going to be better, and Denard Robinson obviously can run a little bit. So it's that concerns me. And the offense, as far as last week goes, looked a little bit better, but still a work in progress. The running game still really not consistent, and a lot of third and longs. And with a young quarterback, you just can't put him in that kind of situation.
Well, Harry, let's take a look at this Minuteman team and its personnel, if we could, for just a couple of minutes. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, as you've just mentioned, it was tough sledding the first few weeks. A lot of young players getting to play right now. Give us a rundown of some of the key players we can look for on the offensive side of the ball for UMass.
Well, I think it starts with Mike Cox, who's the running back. He might be a name familiar to some hardcore Michigan fans. He spent 4 years with the Wolverines before doing a fifth-year transfer over here to UMass. He's from Dorchester, so he's a Massachusetts native, and came back to try to help the Minutemen. It's hard for me to say, Mike, what his talent level is, just because I don't know how much of it falls on the offensive line, and I don't know how much of it falls on him. I'm not a football coach. I don't have access to the all-22 tape. I can only go by what I see in the moment, which I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm some sort of football savant and can just tell. So, I really don't know as far as what he's going to be able to do. I mean, what's been happening is they've run a lot of stretch plays to the outside, sort of zone blocking type runs that really have just ended up being 4 or 5 yard losses more often than they've been 4 or 5 yard gains. And like I said before, those third and longs, and get redshirt freshman quarterback in Mike Wexton, who has the physical tools. He's got a big arm. He's a big kid, 6'5", but just still really learning how to play the position. And his decision-making at times has been questionable, although I guess he only does have 1 interception, so he's got that going for him. But he's another guy to watch for. At the receiver position, you got Markin Michelle, who's kind of their downfield threat, and then a true freshman in Tajay Sharp, who has really, according to the coach, has done a great job grasping the offense. I've been impressed with what I've seen from his route running. Again, I don't have access to the all-22 tape, so it's hard for me to totally say that's been great. But from what I have noticed, that has been good, especially improved last week against Indiana. I saw him run a couple real nice slants and cuts over the middle and make some catches. So if the timing can improve between him and Wexton, that really could be a threat. And so on the offensive side of the ball, those are probably the guys I'd watch out for.
A lot of Michigan observers are going to be interested to see Michael Cox come into town for the Minuteman. He was a mystery player, I think, to most of us that have followed Michigan football for years, because he is so big, so athletic, and it just, for whatever reason, never came together for him. But I just took a quick look at the stats for the last couple of weeks. Possibly the offensive line is the reason, but he doesn't really have seemed to have done much so far.
No, he doesn't, and you're absolutely right. And I was going to mention that myself, about when you see him, he's such a physical specimen.
Right.
He just looks like a guy. I certainly would not want to try to tackle that man. But when you look at the games, I mean, I don't, and then we talk about how much of it is on the offensive line. I wonder, honestly, how much of it is on the play calling as well. I'm not totally, it's been 2 games. I think everyone is sort of getting their feet set here.
Right.
I think that, at times, I've questioned, how many times are you going to go try to run it to the outside when that hasn't worked all day long? How many times are you going to have to lose 5 yards before you figure out that you just can't do that anymore? And, maybe it's that they can't do anything else. I really don't know. I'm not in the headset, so I don't know. But, a lot of times it's just Mike doesn't have anywhere to go. He just doesn't. And so that to me says more about what's around him. But at the same time, how many times have I seen him sort of stop and try to cut back? I made a comment to somebody during the Indiana game. I said, what percentage of runs does Mike Cox come to a complete stop? Because it seems like he stretches out to the outside, and then he almost always will just plant his right or left foot in the ground and try to cut all the way back, and it never works. You got to keep going forward. So I think it's a combination of everything, and they got to get it figured out. Molnar just said on the teleconference a few minutes ago that he believes that Cox is the best running back on his team. So he's going to get the ball. It's just a matter of whether he can do something with it and whether he can get some push up front to help him do that.
Well, Harry, what kind of an offensive philosophy are we going to see on Saturday? Is this more of a pro-style look offense?
No, not at all. It's a wide open spread, mostly 3 wide receivers with a tight end and a running back, but you'll see them go 4 or 5 wide. No, you won't see Mike Wexon under center at all unless it's a sneak or some sort of power run. But no, it's a spread. They try to it's a no-huddle philosophy. When you're not moving the ball forward, it becomes difficult to sort of execute that. And we haven't really seen them get in a huge rhythm very many times this season. Hopefully they'll be able to do that in the coming weeks. I'm thinking that perhaps this week might not be the week that we see it with such a strong opponent. But, no, you'll see a wide-open attack. You'll see Cox in the Wildcat a little bit. They've run that, especially on 3rd and short, quite a few times this season. So you'll see a little bit of that as well.
Our guest on our visitor segment today is Harry Plumer from the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com. Harry covers the UMass Minutemen. Harry, let's switch over to the defensive side for a moment if we could. Coach Molnar has been using a lot of young talent, as you'd probably expect. What type of a defense will we see Saturday from the Minutemen? And fill us in on some of the key personnel on that side of the ball we can look for.
Well, like I think most people in the country are these days, it's sort of a multiple set. I mean, it's a base 4-3 with the 4 down linemen and the 3 linebackers, but you'll obviously see them go to nickel and dime and do some different things with down linemen and move guys around a little bit. Perry McIntyre at the middle linebacker position, I think, is probably their best defender. He tends to do a good job, although he got beat a couple times pretty bad on zone reads against Indiana. Darren Thelen at the free safety position is probably the leader on defense. He had an interception last against Indiana, and then the week before against UConn. I don't know if you saw this on the Sports Center Top 10. He had the number 1 play. He had a play where he sort of jumped out of bounds and batted the ball back into play so that Tom Brandt could intercept it. The linebacker Tom Brandt, and it was quite the play, I have to say. So those are the 2 guys I would probably watch out for. And they're pretty young in the secondary. Beyond that, they've had an injury at the strong safety position. Christian Burt was supposed to be the starter. He got hurt. Then Ed St. Bill stepped in. He was a starter last year for a while. He did a pretty good job in the first half against UConn before he hurt his leg. And so now they're down to a couple true freshmen at the safety position with Joe Colton and Kari Bailey-Smith, and perhaps Burt will be back this week. We don't really know. He did play a little bit against Indiana. So in the secondary, they're young, and that could be a problem this week. Up front, you've got Stanley Andre, who's a converted outside linebacker, who the coaches are really high on, but hasn't done a ton thus far this season. Chaz Thompson is the leader in the middle, and they'll rotate guys in the other positions. You'll see Galen Clemens, Trey Seals, Ryan Dallaire, Kevin Byrne, Brandon Potvin. Those guys will all be in there. They really like to run through 8-9 defensive linemen, as most teams, I think, in this sort of up-tempo age that we're in will do, just to keep guys fresh. So you'll see quite a few different combinations on the defensive line.
Well, Harry, coming into Saturday's game at the Big House, how do things look on the injury front for the Minutemen?
Well, they're supposed to get, and I don't know, I probably should have asked this on the teleconference, but we'll get over to practice later. Anthony Dima, who's a starting tackle for them, offensive tackle, has been out the first 2 weeks. He started last year, and he would be a huge get to get back. He's supposed to be back this week. Obviously, I just don't know. I can't confirm at this moment. We're taping this on Monday, so I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen on Saturday, but he is allegedly going to be back, so that's huge for them. Didn't get too banged up. No one got too banged up against Indiana, which is good. The team is actually pretty healthy beyond the Demas situation. So, well, and obviously, yeah, I don't know if you know this, Mike, but the starting quarterback, Kellen Pagel, he was the original starter, was out in the beginning of spring practice, the beginning of preseason camp with post-concussion symptoms. So that's what sort of thrust the redshirt freshman Mike Wexon into the role. And Pagel out indefinitely, hasn't practiced yet. Saw him in the stands against Indiana, so I'm not sure what's going on there. So, but beyond that, they're pretty healthy. They just need to step up the performance level.
Well, it's been a few years, Harry, since the Minutemen last visited the Big House. I remember it well. The tragic passing of the beloved band leader there at UMass down in the Cleveland area just the night before the game. I think we all remember that. So it's another big visit for UMass, and of course things have changed with joining the MAC and moving up to the FBS level of play. So for Coach Molnar and his staff, what do you think are their realistic expectations for his young team in facing Michigan this Saturday?
It's hard for me to say, because he's always going to say that, they go out, they expect to win, this, that, and the other. I mean, honestly, I think if I were Charlie Molnar, I'd be happy with just not getting my doors blown off. I mean, you just got your doors blown off twice, and now you're going to face a ranked team in their house. One of the biggest stadiums in the nation. You're going to be playing in front of almost 3 times as many people as you played against in front of at UConn, or I guess maybe even more than 3 times if y'all sold out. But I think just to see some progress. I mean, if you can somehow even statistically take a step forward from Indiana against Michigan in their house, then you've done something. You've accomplished something. I don't know, maybe even if you could just keep your production where it was, you've done something. So, I mean, realistically, it's hard to say, but I would think that they would just have to be happy with not getting embarrassed.
Well, as you said, any small step forward at this point, first year in the FBS, I'm sure is something that Coach is looking for. But it's going to be a long, tough season requiring patience from UMass followers. But as you said at the top, they're pretty much expecting that. Realistically, they've got to get up to scholarship levels and get a different kind of athlete to compete at this level, even in the MAC.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the MAC didn't do them any favors as far as scheduling goes. They've got to play Western Michigan and Northern Illinois out of the West, which are 2 of the 3 stronger teams in that division, and they've got on the road to Miami of Ohio after Michigan, and then Frank Solich brings Ohio in. I mean, those are solid teams. I think Miami of Ohio really kind of got a little unlucky last year. Should be able to take a step forward this year to get back to kind of where they were in that surprise season under Haywood 2 years ago. But yeah, I mean the MAC is better this year. I really think the MAC as a whole, and Mike, you probably saw it in week 1. They had some teams out there competing. Mm-hmm. Bowling Green was right there with Florida for most of the game. Northern Illinois probably should have won that game against Iowa. The MAC is better this year. It really is, and I think you'll see that as we go forward. And Ohio obviously winning that game in week 1, and now really set up to potentially go run the table. They should be favored for every game for the rest of the season. So the MAC is better, and UMass is down. I mean, you look at a UMass team that 6 years ago was playing for an FCS title, and now last year was 5-6 in the FCS. So the timing in that sense hasn't been great. You can blame that on a number of factors. I guess you got to take the move when you can make it, but you can blame the fact that the program declined a little bit on a number of different factors. So, it's going to take time. It's going to take time, but Charlie Molnar, say what you want. I don't know exactly. We've only seen him coach 2 games, but he's a high energy guy. He seems to be doing a good job on the recruiting trail, if we can believe the Rivals rankings. And, UMass headed more in the right direction than the wrong direction at this point, but it's still early, so we'll see.
Well, we shall see Saturday, and it should be a lot of fun, hopefully. Our guest on the show today has been Harry Plumer, who covers the UMass Minutemen from the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com. Harry, thanks for taking time from a very busy day for you to be on the show.
No problem, Mike. We'll see you out there at Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor on Saturday.
Thank you, Harry. That's Harry Plumer, who covers the UMass Minutemen for the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com. Coming up next on our Michigan Game Day segment, we'll be rejoined by Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press with his take on this weekend's game. That's next here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Our guest on our Michigan Game Day segment today is Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. And Mark, looking ahead to this Saturday's game with UMass, we know that Coach Charlie Molnar is bringing in a bad UMass Minuteman team. It's their first season at the FBS level. They're first in the MAC. They've taken 2 pastings in their first 2 games, the opener to Connecticut and then Saturday to the Hoosiers. This should be a game, looking at it right now, that helps Michigan get a lot of work with the young guys and the continuity on both sides of the ball, feel a little bit better about themselves. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And if they don't dominate Massachusetts, that's when you can be worried, and that's when people can start complaining about the sky falling, because if a good team, even a very good team, will hammer the teams that they need to, and they'll get out early, they'll get some rest for their guys, and they'll use it as a quasi-bye week. I mean, after camp and then 2 very physical games against Alabama and Air Force, Michigan needs that. They need to give these guys a little rest, especially if they want to go to Notre Dame at something close to full strength.
And it's going to be a great game to get that running game going with Fitz and keep working the new receiving corps too, isn't it?
Yeah, they have a lot of things to work on, and that's something that they'll be able to hopefully do early in the game and have some production, especially from the tailback position. Obviously it's all going to be in context, because people are going to say, well, you played against a terrible team, but they still need the confidence and the feeling of getting that stuff done, of the defensive line forcing turnovers and getting pressure and getting sacks, and rushing the ball with the tailback and not just Denard, and protecting Denard so he doesn't have to go for 420 yards or whatever it was.
And you mentioned earlier too, Mark, Coach Hoke said on defense he's got to get the best players on the field, and it looks like a lot of those guys are going to be freshmen. So this week we should see more of Joe Bolden at linebacker, Pipkins on the D-line, and Ross at linebacker again, wouldn't you say?
I think so, because those guys got to get game experience. They're young, and the only way, no matter who it's against, game experience can't be simulated in practice. So if you've got an opponent who's maybe a little overmatched, this is a good time to get those guys reps and understand what the feeling at this level and the intensity of the game is like.
Well, because this team is so overmatched, they being UMass, is this the kind of a game for fans that we learn anything about this Michigan team, or is this more for the coaching staff to learn about their kids moving forward?
Well, I think the Michigan fans, especially in a home game, would like to see a blowout. It's good for their confidence, too, to have some faith in the team and say, I went and I saw them dominate someone. I mean, it's encouraging and helps the brand for sure.
Well, if this game is anything short of a blowout, should we be concerned?
Yeah, I think so, because you know what? That's, like I just said before, that's what good teams do. Good teams can handle their business and take care of their business when they need to. If you get into a little dogfight, with a team that's far below your level, especially when you just saw, one of the Big Ten's worst teams in Indiana hammer them, then you got to be concerned about, where you are, because you should be able to take care of things like this.
Well, it will be interesting to see Game 3 coming up this week. The UMass Minutemen in town, and they are 0-2 after 2 horrid first 2 games, so we'll find out more about our team, I'm sure, on Saturday. Our guest today on Michigan Game Day has been Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Mark, always a pleasure. Look forward to having you back on again later this season.
Look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again to Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press for being our guest on the Michigan Game Day segment. Coming up next, we wrap it up for another week on Wolverine Quick Hits, right here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, no significant injuries to report heading into this week's action. Brennan Byer will miss the UMass game with a minor knee injury. Courtney Avery suffered a back injury late in Saturday's game, but is expected to be ready to go. And Richard Ashe, who has what Coach Hoke described as a boo-boo at Monday's presser, should also be ready for action on Saturday. Other than those injuries, the team is in very good health heading into Week 3. Here are some quick facts about this week's opponent, the UMass Minutemen. Michigan leads the series 1-0 in the only meeting between these teams on September 18, 2010. Michigan came away with a much tougher than expected 42-37 victory. The Minutemen are coached by Charlie Molnar, who is in his first year at the helm. This year they are making the jump from FCS to the FBS and will begin play in the MAC in the next few weeks. Last year they were 5-6 overall for the season. The Minutemen returned 6 starters on offense and 9 on defense. They opened the season with a 37-0 loss to UConn and then fell to Indiana last week at home. They enter this week's action with an 0-2 record. Don't forget to become a member here at GBMW. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. Benefits include email reminders when a story is published or a mailbag question is answered. You also need to become a member for full participation on our message board. As a member here on GBMW, you can also take part in our popular Monday Night Live chat with E-Rock Wolverine, Coach BT, Maze Man, Doc for Blue, World's Wolverine, and our hockey guru, Yostmeister. The Monday Night Live chat takes place at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so check it out. Join GBMW today and get your daily fix of Maize and Blue news and conversation. Then each Wednesday, you can check out the Michigan Man podcast. The show is now available as an Android app, which can be purchased from the Android App Store at Amazon.com. If you're an Apple person, you'll find our app in the Libsyn toolbox at the iTunes App Store. If you listen to the show on your Apple device, please take a minute to give us a review. It does help a lot. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your comments. If you'd like to have your Maize and Blue opinion heard, give us a call at 313-263-4842. Then leave an audio with your thoughts on this football season, the upcoming basketball season, hockey, recruiting, anything that's on your mind. Just give us your name, where you're calling from, and then ramble on. If you'd rather send us an email, our address is the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. I'll have both the email address and the phone number in our show notes. I welcome your thoughts on anything Maize and Blue, so please give us a call or drop us a line. Thanks again to our guests today, Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press and Harry Plumer, who covers UMass for the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com. We'll be back next Wednesday to recap the UMass game and scout the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame for that big road trip down to South Bend. Our scheduled guests are beat writer Kyle Meinke from AnnArbor.com and lead writer Lou Somogyi from the Notre Dame magazine, Blue and Gold, so don't miss it. Kickoff for Saturday's game is just after 3:30 p.m. So until next Wednesday, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Think victory, beat UMass, and until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!